The hammer slipped from Walter Morrison's weathered hands, clattering against the wooden fence post. Pain, sharp, blinding, tore through his back like lightning splitting an ancient oak. He gasped, knees buckling, fingers clawing at the splintered wood for balance that wouldn't come. 74 years of standing tall, gone in a breath. He hit the ground hard. Cold September earth pressed against his cheek. Something warm soaked through his flannel shirt, spreading. The secret he'd carried for 20 years had finally broken open. Through blurring vision, he saw Tom Palmer's face appear above him, mouth moving in silent horror. The neighbor's hands reached for him, but Walter couldn't feel them anymore, only the weight. The unbearable weight he'd carried alone. And now, everybody would know. The siren's wail split the Montana afternoon like a scream he'd swallowed for 2 decades. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 3 years earlier, Sarah Morrison Fletcher had driven this same highway toward Millbrook, pregnant with hope that maybe this Thanksgiving would be different. Maybe her father would finally let her in. Maybe the walls he'd built after Mom died would crack. Just enough for a daughter's love to seep through. She turned around at the county line, hands shaking on the wheel. Her daughter Emma asking why they weren't visiting Grandpa anymore, because he doesn't want us there, honey. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was more complicated, thornier, wrapped in 48 years of a love language neither of them had learned to speak. Walter Morrison had been a different man once. Sarah remembered summer evenings when Dad would hoist her onto his shoulders, her small hands gripping his thick brown hair as he carried her through the workshop, the smell of sawdust and pine, his deep laugh when she'd hammer a nail crooked. That's all right, Sarah Bear. Even the bent nails hold something together. After Michael Jr. died, her brother, her protector, gone at 28 in a collision with a drunk driver, something in their father had died too. Not all at once, more like a tree rotting from the inside, still standing but hollowed out. Then came Mom's cancer. 3 years of hospitals and hope and horror. Sarah watched her father sell everything the vintage truck he'd restored by hand. The woodworking tools passed down from his own father, finally the 10 acres behind the house where he'd planned to build Emma a treehouse someday. It's just land, he'd said when Sarah protested. Your mother is everything. Martha Morrison died on a Tuesday in March, daffodils blooming outside the hospice window. Walter held her hand for 16 hours straight, wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, wouldn't leave. When she finally slipped away, he kissed her forehead and walked out of that room a ghost. The funeral was a blur. The house afterwards was worse, too quiet, too empty, too full of memories that cut like glass. Sarah had stayed for a week, cooking meals her father wouldn't eat, washing clothes he didn't change, trying to fill a silence that swallowed every word. Dad, come live with us. Emma needs her grandpa. You shouldn't be alone. I'm fine. Those 2 words, his armor, his shield, his lie. She'd tried. God knows she'd tried. Phone calls every Sunday that grew shorter and shorter. Invitations to birthdays, holidays, graduations all declined with the same tired excuses. Too busy, too far, too tired. The last time she'd asked was Emma's 13th birthday. A simple party, nothing fancy. Pizza and cake and a grandfather who might actually show up for once. I can't make it. Sweetheart, my back's been acting up. Then let me come help you. Dad, let me. I said I'm fine. Sarah, click, she'd stared at her phone, tears of frustration burning behind her eyes, while Emma blew out candles and pretended not to notice the empty chair at the table. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of growing distance, of conversations that never went deeper than weather and work. 3 years of Osra convincing herself that maybe her father had never really loved her the way she'd thought. Maybe she'd imagined the warmth in those childhood memories. Maybe the man who'd once called her Sarah Bear had only been going through the motions of fatherhood, and now that Mom was gone, he didn't have to pretend anymore. The bitterness had calcified around her heart like scar tissue. Now, gripping the steering wheel as Millbrook's familiar mountains rose ahead, Sarah felt that bitterness crack. The hospital's call had been clinical. Efficient Walter Morrison, 74, emergency surgery required, next of kin notification. They'd used the word critical. 4 hours of highway blurred past. Emma sat silent in the passenger seat. 16 now, tall and serious and looking so much like the grandmother she barely remembered. The girl kept glancing at her mother's white knuckles on the wheel, the tears Sarah couldn't quite hold back. Mom, is Grandpa gonna die? Sarah's throat closed around the truth that she couldn't speak. Instead, she pressed harder on the accelerator, racing toward a man who'd spent 3 years pushing her away, praying she wouldn't arrive too late to understand why. The Millbrook exit sign flashed past. 5 more miles to St. Mary's Hospital. 5 more miles to whatever waited behind those automatic doors, reconciliation or regret, answers or empty goodbyes. Albus. St. Mary's Hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. Sarah's sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as she rushed through the emergency department. Emma trailing behind, both of them breathless from the parking lot sprint. Walter Morrison! Sarah gasped at the reception desk. He was brought in by ambulance. Room 147 ICU wing. The nurse didn't look up from her computer. 3rd floor, elevators to your right. The elevator took forever. Sarah watched the numbers climb 1, 2, 3 each floor, a small eternity. Her reflection in the steel doors showed a woman she barely recognized, hair disheveled, mascara smudged, eyes wild with something between terror and rage. How dare he wait this long? How dare he suffer alone? Room 147 sat at the end of a fluorescent-lit hallway. Through the small window, Sarah could see her father's profile older, grayer, smaller somehow than the man who'd once seemed invincible. Tubes snaked from his arms. Monitors beeped steady rhythms that meant he was still alive. Still here, still hers to lose. She pushed through the door. Walter's eyes opened. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the sterile gap between door and bedside. 3 years of silence hung heavy as smoke. Caw. His voice cracked around her name. You didn't have to come. Didn't have to. The words died in her throat. She moved closer, and that's when she saw it. The hospital gown had slipped, exposing his shoulder, the edge of his back. Purple bruises bloomed across pale skin like storm clouds. But worse, so much worse, was the mass protruding beneath his shoulder blade, swollen, angry red, the size of a grapefruit pressing against skin stretched too thin. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Dad! Oh, my God! Dad! What is that? It's nothing, just don't you dare say you're fine." Her voice shook with fury and grief tangled together. "Don't you dare!" Emma stepped into the room, went pale at the sight of her grandfather. "Grandpa!" Walter's expression crumbled. He turned his face toward the wall, shoulders trembling with something that might have been a sob. The door opened behind them. A woman in a white coat entered, dark hair pulled back, exhaustion etched around her eyes. "Mrs. Fletcher, I'm Dr. Rebecca Thornton. I've been overseeing your father's case." Sarah couldn't look away from her father's back. "What is that thing?" Dr. Thornton moved to the bedside, her expression grave. "Mr. Morrison has been living with a large teratoma, a type of tumor, for what we believe has been nearly 20 years. The CT scan shows it contains complex structures, calcified tissue, hair follicles, fatty deposits. It's been growing slowly, but it's now pressing against his spinal cord." 20 years? Sarah's voice pitched high. "You've had this for 20 years and never told anyone." Walter's silence was answer enough. Dr. Thornton continued, her tone clinical but not unkind. "The tumor has reached a critical size. It's compressing the nerve roots of the thoracic spine. Without surgical intervention, Mr. Morrison will likely experience complete paralysis of his lower extremities within 10 days. Possibly sooner." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "And with surgery," Sarah forced herself to ask. "It's complicated. The tumor is deeply embedded in the surrounding tissue. The procedure would take several hours, require a team of specialists. Given your father's age and overall health," Dr. Thornton paused, choosing her words carefully. "The survival rate for this type of surgery in a patient his age is approximately 60%. 60%, up a 40% chance that he'd on that table." "When?" Sarah heard herself ask. "When would you operate? We'd need to schedule it within the week." "But there's another issue." Dr. Thornton glanced at Walter, who'd gone very still. "Mr. Morrison, I think you need to tell your daughter about the insurance situation." Sarah's blood went cold. What insurance situation? Her father's jaw worked, but no words came out. Dr. Thornton's expression softened with something like pity. "Your father's insurance lapsed 6 months ago. The estimated cost for this surgery, including hospital stay and post-operative care, is approximately $180,000. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. $180,000. She thought of her own bank account, the meager savings scraped together from 2 jobs, the credit cards already maxed from Emma's school expenses, the mortgage payment due next week. "Dad." Her voice came out strangled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Walter finally turned to look at her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Shame. Raw, devastating shame. "I didn't want to be your burden," he whispered. "You've got Emma to think about, your own life. I'm just an old man who—" "Stop." Sarah's hand shot out, gripping his weathered fingers. They felt so fragile, bird-bone delicate. When had her father become so breakable? "You're not a burden. You're my dad." But even as she said it, the math calculated itself in her head. $180,000, 10 days, 60% survival rate. Outside the window, Montana's autumn sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. Time, Sarah realized with sick certainty, was something they'd wasted too much of already. And now they might not have enough left to make anything right. Sarah left Emma with her grandfather and followed Dr. Thornton to a small consultation room down the hall. The walls were beige, inoffensive, designed to absorb bad news without judgment. A box of tissues sat on the desk like a prophet of tears to come. "I need to understand something," Sarah said, closing the door behind her. "How does someone let something like this go for 20 years? Sartut. Dr. Thornton leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Fear? Pride? Sometimes both. She paused, studying Sarah with odd eyes that had seen too many families splinter in rooms like this. "Your father strikes me as the kind of man who spent his whole life being the strong one. Am I right?" Sarah thought of her father teaching Michael Jude to swing a hammer, teaching her to ride a bike, carrying her mother up the stairs when chemo left her too weak to walk. Always lifting, always carrying, never asking for help. "Yeah," she whispered, "that's him." Men like that don't know how to be patient. They don't know how to be vulnerable. To Thornton's voice carried a weight Sarah couldn't quite place. They'll suffer in silence until their body gives them no choice. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her boss. "Need you on shift tomorrow. Can't give you more than 2 days off." She stared at the message, calculating impossible math. 2 days off. A father who needed surgery in 10 days, $180,000 she didn't have. "I need to make some calls," Sarah said, already pulling up her bank's app, checking account $3,847. Savings empty, rated last month for Emma's school fees, credit cards maxed. She tried the bank first. The loan officer was apologetic but firm. With her current debt-to-income ratio, she didn't qualify. She tried her credit union, denied. She even called the predatory lender with the billboard on Highway 90, the one that promised quick cash, no questions. They offered her $12,000 at 29% interest, not even close. Sarah sat in her car in the hospital parking lot as the sun bled out across the sky and let herself cry. Angry, helpless tears that solved nothing, but at least acknowledged the enormity of the impossible situation crushing down on her shoulders. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Mrs. Fletcher, this is Jennifer from St. Mary's Billing Department. I wanted to discuss your father's account. I know. I'm working on it. I understand this is difficult, but hospital policy requires a 50% deposit before we can schedule elective surgery." "Elective?" Sarah's voice turned sharp as glass. "My father will be paralyzed without this surgery. How is that elective?" A pause, the sound of typing. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Fletcher. That's just what the system categorizes it as. We'll need $90,000 before—" Sarah hung up. Her hand shook so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. 90,000. By the end of the week. She drove back to her father's house as dusk settled over Millbrook like a bruise. She'd kept her key all these years, though she'd stopped using it. The door stuck. A little needed the bottom planed down, her father would have said, but opened into darkness and dust and silence. Sarah flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. She tried another. Boy, dead. In the kitchen. She found the reason: a stack of unopened utility bills on the table. Red notices screaming, "Final warning." The electricity had been cut off 3 weeks ago. Gas, 2 months before that. Her father had been living without heat, without light, alone in the cold and dark. Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, the wood creaking under her weight. Around her, the house whispered its secrets. Dishes in the sink from a meal eaten alone, a coffee cup with a ring of mold, a calendar on the wall still showing March, the month her mother died 8 years ago. Time had stopped in this house. Her father had stopped with it. She forced herself to search for financial documents. In the rollback desk in the living room, she found folders meticulously labeled in her father's careful handwriting. Mortgage paid off. Insurance expired. Medical terrifying. But there was another box, pushed to the back of the bottom drawer. Sarah pulled it out, opened it. Letters, dozens of them, yellowed with age, written in different hands. Dear Mr. Morrison, I wanted to thank you for fixing our roof after the storm. You wouldn't take payment, but you gave us something more valuable, hope that there are still good people in this world. Walter, I don't know if you remember me, but I was the kid whose mom couldn't afford to fix our porch. You showed up one Saturday with lumber and taught me how to swing a hammer. I'm writing from college now, got a full scholarship to Montana State for engineering. I wouldn't be here without you. Mr. Morrison, when my husband left us with 3 kids and a house falling apart, you were the only one who helped. You never asked for anything in return. I'm paying it forward now, helping my own neighbors, because you showed me what real kindness looks like. Letter after letter, story after story, 20 years of silent generosity, of helping everyone except himself. Sarah's vision blurred. Her father had given everything away, his time, his skills, his money, his health, to everyone but his own family, not because he didn't love them, but because he didn't know how to receive love in return. A man who'd spent his whole life fixing things for other people while he quietly broke apart. She pulled out her phone, hands still shaking, and opened her contacts. Scrolled past hundreds of names to the one she needed, Tom Palmer, her father's neighbor, the last person who'd seen Walter before the collapse. He answered on the second ring. Sarah, how's your dad? Tom. Her voice cracked. I need your help, and I think my father's going to be furious with me for asking. A pause. Then, tell me what you need. Tom Palmer arrived at the hospital the next morning, carrying a thermos of coffee and a leather notebook worn soft with age. He was 68, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and eyes that crinkled at the corners from a lifetime of squinting at Montana sun. Sarah met him in the cafeteria, unable to face her father's room yet. She'd spent the night on the uncomfortable couch in the waiting area, dozing fitfully between nightmares of paralysis and debt, and a father dying alone because she couldn't save him. He's gonna hate this, Sarah said, as Tom slid into the booth across from her. He's going to tell us to mind our own business. Then it's a good thing Walter Morrison doesn't get a vote this time. Tom opened the notebook, revealing pages of names and phone numbers written in cramped script. I've been his neighbor for 40 years. Watched him help half this town put their lives back together. About time we returned the favor. Tom, we're talking about $180,000. That's not... I know what we're talking about. Tom's voice was gentle but firm. Sarah, do you know why Walter and I became friends? She shook her head. 25 years ago, my house caught fire, electrical fault in the basement. My wife got out, but my boy Danny was 7 years old. He'd gone back in for his dog. I was trying to get to him, but the smoke was too thick, flames too hot. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't—" His voice caught. "Your father ran past me into that burning house, found Danny in his bedroom, wrapped him in a wet blanket, carried him out, saved his life." Sarah's breath hitched. "Danny's 32 now, got 2 kids of his own, lives in Bozeman, teaches high school history. None of that exists without Walter Morrison." Tom's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Your father never mentioned it, did he?" "No, of course not. That's who he is." Tom tapped the notebook. "Every name in here has a story like mine. He fixed Margaret Chen's roof after the blizzard of 2010 wouldn't take a dime. Taught Dave Thompson carpentry when Dave lost his job, got him back on his feet. Built a wheelchair ramp for the Rodriguez family when their daughter came home from the war. Walter Morrison has been this town's guardian angel for 4 decades, and he did it all in the shadows." Sarah thought of the letters in her father's desk drawer, the silent catalog of kindness. "So here's what we're going to do," Tom continued. "I'm starting a GoFundMe this morning. I'll go door to door if I have to. Everyone in Millbrook owes Walter something money. Time, gratitude, time to collect. Dad will never accept charity. Then we don't tell him until after the surgery." Tom stood, determination etched into every line of his weathered face. Sometimes you gotta save a man from his own pride. By noon, Tom had knocked on 12 doors. By evening, the number was 47. Each conversation followed the same pattern: shock at Walter's condition, immediate willingness to help, followed by their own story of Walter's quiet generosity. Sarah watched it unfold from the hospital, refreshing the GoFundMe page Tom had created with the simple title, "Help Walter Morrison. He's helped all of us." The first donation came within minutes, $100 from Margaret Chen, with the note, "Walter gave me a roof over my head. Now I give him life." Then 50 from Dave Thompson, 25 from a woman named Patricia Hernandez, 15 from a teenager named Kyle Anderson, who wrote, "Mr. Morrison taught me how to fix my truck. Saved me thousands. Here's what I can afford." The donations trickled in slowly at first. By the time Sarah left the hospital that night, the total stood at $4,200. Not even close to what they needed, but something, a start. Emma had stayed with her grandfather most of the day, and when Sarah returned to the room, she found them looking at something on Emma's phone. "Mom, look." Emma held up the screen. She'd posted a video on TikTok, just her sitting in the hospital hallway, speaking directly to the camera. Sarah tapped play. "This is my grandpa Walter. I haven't seen him in 3 years. Not because he doesn't love me, but because he loved me too much to let me see him suffering." Emma's voice cracked, 16-year-old composure fracturing. "He has a tumor in his back that's been growing for 20 years. He never told anyone because he didn't want to be a burden. But here's the thing. You can't be a burden to people who love you. You can only break their hearts by suffering alone." The video showed Emma walking into Walter's room, showing him sleeping, the monitors beeping, tubes running from his arms. Then a photo of Walter from 20 years ago, strong and smiling, holding baby Emma in his massive carpenter's hands. This is what pride does. This is what toxic masculinity looks like. This is what happens when we teach men they have to be strong all the time, that asking for help is weakness, that vulnerability is failure. Emma's face was tear-streaked but fierce. "My grandpa needs surgery that costs more than most people make in 3 years. We're asking for help, and If you've ever felt alone, ever suffered in silence, ever been too proud to say, "I need you," please share this. Please help us save the grandpa I almost lost to silence. The video had been posted 3 hours ago. It had 500,000 views. Sarah looked at her daughter, this almost woman who'd learned something Sarah was still learning, that love meant fighting for people even when they pushed you away. "Emma, I know Dad would hate it," Emma said. "But Grandpa taught you to be strong. Someone needs to teach him that asking for help is strong too." Walter's eyes opened. He'd been awake, listening. Father and granddaughter stared at each other across the hospital bed, across 3 years of absence, across the chasm of pride and love that had kept them apart. "I'm sorry," Walter whispered, the words foreign in his mouth. "I'm so sorry I taught you the wrong lesson." Emma took his hand. "Then let us teach you a new one." Sarah's phone buzzed. The GoFundMe total had jumped to $15,000. Then 17, then 20. Donations pouring in from across the country, from strangers who'd seen Emma's video and recognized their own fathers, grandfathers, the men who'd suffered silently because no one had taught them any other way. The comments flooded in. "This is my dad, sharing, lost my father to pride. Don't let this happen. Here's $50. Wish I could give more. Save your grandpa." Outside the window, the Montana sky darkened to purple. Inside room 47, something else was awakening, not just in Walter Morrison, but spreading outward like ripples on still water, the quiet revolution of asking for help. By the fourth day, Emma's video had been viewed 3 million times. The GoFundMe had climbed to $78,000. Still not enough, but close enough that Sarah could almost taste the possibility of hope. Then the hospital administrator called her into his office. Gerald Hutchins sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than Sarah made in 6 months. He was 50-something, silver-haired, wearing a suit that screamed private golf clubs and vacation homes. He smiled with too many teeth. "Mrs. Fletcher, I wanted to discuss your father's case personally." Sarah's stomach tightened. "We're working on the payment. We'll have it at—" "That's actually what I wanted to talk about." Hutchins folded his hands on the desk. "St. Mary's has a board meeting tomorrow. They're concerned about the liability of performing such a high-risk surgery on a 74-year-old patient with no insurance and uncertain ability to pay." The words took a moment to penetrate. When they did, Sarah felt her blood go cold. "Are you saying you won't operate?" "I'm saying the board has concerns. Your father's age, his overall health, the complexity of the procedure, the risk of complications is substantial. If something goes wrong during surgery, the hospital could face significant legal exposure." "Legal exposure?" Sarah's voice came out flat, emotionless. "Because if she let any feeling in at all, she would explode. My father will be paralyzed in 6 days. You're worried about lawsuits. Mrs. Fletcher, I understand this is emotional, but no." Sarah stood, her chair scraping loud against the polished floor. "You don't understand. You sit in your expensive office wearing your expensive suit, and you reduce my father's life to a cost-benefit analysis. He's not a liability. He's a person. Mrs. Fletcher, he's a person who spent 40 years helping people in this town, who ran into a burning building to save a child, who fixed roofs and built ramps and taught kids carpentry and never asked for a damn thing in return. And now, when he finally needs help, you're telling me he's too risky." Hutchins' jaw tightened. I'm telling you, the board has concerns that need to be addressed. Then address them. Sarah leaned across the desk, fury burning away any remaining diplomacy. Because if my father dies because your board was more worried about money than saving lives, I will make sure every news station in Montana knows exactly what kind of hospital St. Mary's really is. She walked out before he could respond, hands shaking with rage and fear and something close to desperation. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Dr. Thornton. I heard, the doctor said quietly. Hutchins called me in before you, wanted my opinion on whether the surgery was worth the risk. And what did you tell him? Dr. Thornton's expression was unreadable. I told him that I didn't go to medical school to calculate risk-reward ratios. I went to save lives. She paused. I also told him that if the board refuses to approve the surgery, I'll perform it pro bono and take full legal responsibility. Sarah's throat closed. Why would you do that? Because 18 years ago, my father had early-stage colon cancer, completely treatable. But he was 62, retired, living on a fixed income, and he didn't want to burden anyone with the cost. So he didn't tell us. By the time we found out, it was stage 4. Dr. Thornton's voice remained steady, but her eyes betrayed old grief. He died 6 months later. And every day I wonder what would have happened if someone had fought for him the way I should have. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be ready. Dr. Thornton glanced down the hallway toward the administrator's office. The board meets tomorrow at 9. I plan to make my case. It would help if they heard from the community, from the people whose lives Walter touched. Sarah thought of Tom Palmer's notebook, the names and phone numbers and stories. I'll make some calls. That evening, Sarah returned to her father's hospital room to find him awake, staring at the ceiling. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of amber and shadow. They might not do the surgery, Walter said without preamble. I heard the nurse talking. Sarah sank into the chair beside his bed. We're working on it. Maybe they're right. His voice was barely above a whisper. I'm 74 years old. Sarah, I've lived a full life. Why spend all that money, take all that risk for a few more years of an old man? Stop! Sarah grabbed his hand, squeezed hard enough to hurt. Don't you dare give up. I'm tired, sweetheart. I've been tired for a long time. I know you are. Tears burned behind Sarah's eyes. But, Dad, you don't get to decide you're not worth saving. That's not how this works. Walter turned his head, finally meeting her gaze. In his eyes, she saw decades of weariness, of carrying weight alone, of believing that strength meant never asking for rest. Your mother used to tell me I was stubborn as an ox, he said softly. Said I'd work myself into the grave before I'd ever admit I needed help. She was right. I know. A tear slid down his weathered cheek. I spent 20 years hiding this thing on my back because I was ashamed, because I thought if I admitted I was sick, I'd be weak, and weak men don't deserve. His voice broke. I don't know what they deserve. Sarah climbed onto the hospital bed, carefully avoiding the tubes and wires, and wrapped her arms around her father the way he'd held her when she was small. He felt fragile, bird-boned, nothing like the giant who'd carried her on his shoulders. You deserve to live. She whispered against his shoulder. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to let people help you the way you've helped everyone else your whole life. Walter's shoulders shook with silent sobs. I don't know how. Then we'll teach you. They stayed like that as darkness fell outside. Father and daughter, holding each other across decades of distance, finally breached. The monitors beeped. The hospital hummed with its nighttime sounds. And somewhere in the building, Gerald Hutchins was preparing his report for tomorrow's board meeting, calculating the value of a human life in terms of dollars and risk. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Tom Palmer. Got 40 people ready to speak at the board meeting tomorrow. Margaret Chen's bringing her whole church. Dave Thompson rallied the Carpenters Union. We're not giving up on Walter. Another text. This one from a number she didn't recognize, Mrs. Fletcher. This is Marcus Brennan. I saw your daughter's video. Walter Morrison paid my way through college 25 years ago. I'd like to help. Can we talk? Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her father's head against her shoulder, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the terrible fragility of this moment balanced on the edge of hope and despair. Tomorrow would bring the board meeting, the decision, the possibility of surgery or the certainty of paralysis. But tonight, in this dim hospital room, Walter Morrison was learning something he should have learned decades ago. That being held is not the same as being weak. That asking for help is its own kind of courage. That love, real love, means letting people fight for you even when you're too tired to fight for yourself. The hospital boardroom filled before dawn. Tom Palmer arrived first, wearing the same suit he'd worn to his son's wedding. Margaret Chen brought 17 members of her congregation. Dave Thompson showed up with 12 union carpenters, all in their work boots and flannel, looking like they'd fight the board with hammers if necessary. By 8:30, 53 people crowded into a room meant for 20. Gerald Hutchins looked distinctly uncomfortable as he called the meeting to order at 9 sharp. 6 board members sat at the head table: doctors, administrators, the hospital's legal counsel. They wore expressions ranging from sympathetic to openly hostile. We're here to discuss the Morrison case, Hutchins began. Mr. Walter Morrison, age 74, requires spinal surgery to remove a teratoma. The estimated cost is $100,000 to $80,000. The patient has no insurance and limited financial resources. Dr. Thornton has volunteered to perform the surgery pro bono, but the hospital still faces significant expenses for operating room time, anesthesia, post-operative care, and most concerning potential legal liability should complications arise. Dr. Thornton stood. With respect, Gerald, we're not here to discuss finances. We're here to discuss whether this hospital will uphold its mission to save lives, or whether we've become so risk-averse that we let a man die to protect our liability insurance. The legal counsel, a thin woman named Patricia Valdez, cleared her throat. Dr. Thornton, you're asking the hospital to absorb nearly $200,000 in costs for a surgery with a 60% success rate. If Mr. Morrison dies on the table, his family could sue. I won't sue. Sarah stood from the back of the room, Emma beside her. I'm his daughter. I'm his next of kin. And I'm telling you right now, in front of all these witnesses, if my father dies during surgery, I will not hold this hospital responsible. I'll sign whatever waiver you need. Mrs. Fletcher, it's not that simple. Then make it simple. Sarah's voice cut through the room like a blade. "My father is dying. Every day you delay is a day closer to permanent paralysis. Stop hiding behind lawyers and liability and tell me the truth. Are you going to help him or not?" A heavy silence fell. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Tom Palmer rose slowly, his weathered hands gripping the back of the chair in front of him. "Maybe you folks don't know Walter Morrison. Maybe you moved here recently, or you live in your big houses on the hill and don't come down to where regular people live. So, let me tell you who you're deciding whether to save." He pulled out his phone, brought up a photo. "This is my son, Danny. He's alive because Walter Morrison ran into a burning building 25 years ago and carried him out through flames and smoke. That man risked his life without hesitation, without asking what it would cost him, without calculating the odds." Margaret Chin stood. "Walter Morrison built a wheelchair ramp for my mother when she couldn't afford one. Spent 3 weekends doing it, never asked for a penny. Dave Thompson. He taught me carpentry when I was unemployed and desperate. Got me back on my feet. One by one, they stood up. Teachers whose students Walter had helped, families whose homes he'd repaired, veterans he'd quietly supported. Each story another layer of invisible kindness, decades of giving that had gone unnoticed, unrecorded, unrewarded. "He's been this town's guardian angel for 40 years, Tom said. "And now you're telling us he's too expensive to save." Patricia Valdez looked uncomfortable. "It's not about expense." "Yes, it is." Emma's voice rang clear through the room. 16 years old, standing in a room full of adults who held her grandfather's life in their hands. "You're saying my grandpa's life has a dollar value, that he's worth saving if he can pay, but not if he can't. You're saying poor people don't deserve to live. That's not. Then prove it." Emma pulled out her phone. "Because I'm live streaming this meeting right now. 300,000 people are watching. They're watching you decide whether my grandfather, who spent his whole life helping others, deserves to die because he's poor." Hutchins went pale. "You can't." "I already am." Emma held up her screen, showing the comments flooding in. "And everyone watching knows exactly what kind of hospital St. Mary's is." The room erupted, board members conferring urgently, Hutchins trying to restore order, Patricia Valdez whispering frantically to the hospital director. Dr. Thornton's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough." She stood, facing the board directly. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm performing this surgery tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Whether you approve it or not, fire me if you want, sue me if you need to. But I took an oath to do no harm, and watching Walter Morrison become paralyzed because we were too cowardly to help him, that's harm." She pulled an envelope from her coat pocket. "This is my formal request to use operating room 3, along with my agreement to cover any legal liability personally. The community has raised $92,000 through GoFundMe. I'm contributing the remaining $88,000 from my own savings. So the hospital's financial exposure is exactly 0. Sarah's jaw dropped. 92,000 the last time she'd checked. It was 78. Tom caught her eye, smiled. "People kept giving after you went to bed last night. The whole country's been watching your daughter's videos." The board members looked at each other. The hospital director, an older man named Charles Brennan, leaned forward. "Dr. Thornton, you're offering to personally guarantee the entire cost of this surgery." "I am." That's your entire life savings? Yes, it is. Rebecca Thornton's voice didn't waver. Some things are worth more than money. I learned that the hard way when I lost my father. I won't make that mistake twice. Charles Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at his fellow board members, all in favor of approving Thornton's request. 6 hands went up. 6 out of 6. The room exploded with cheers, people crying, hugging, shouting with joy and relief. Emma collapsed into Sarah's arms, both of them sobbing. "We have to prep your father immediately," Thornton said, already moving toward the door. "Surgery is tomorrow morning. He needs to be ready." Sarah grabbed the doctor's hand. "Thank you. I don't know how to save your thanks until after the surgery." But Rebecca Thornton smiled. And for the first time since they'd met, Sarah saw hope in her eyes instead of sorrow. Tomorrow would bring 7 hours of surgery, of waiting, of praying that 60% odds would be enough. But today, Walter Morrison had learned what his daughter already knew, that he was worth saving, that love meant fighting even when the odds were against you, that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is let himself be loved. The night before surgery, Walter couldn't sleep. Pain medication dulled the worst of it over, but his mind raced with thoughts he'd spent 20 years avoiding. At 2 in the morning, he asked the nurse for paper and a pen. She brought him a yellow legal pad and a blue ballpoint. His hand shook so badly the first 3 attempts were illegible. He crumpled them, started again. "Dear Sarah." The words looked wrong, too formal, too distant. He tried again. "Sarah Bear, better." That's what he used to call her when she was Saul, before life got hard and he forgot how to be soft. "I'm writing this because I might not get the chance tomorrow. And there are things I need to say, things I should have said years ago. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry for all of it, for pushing you away after your brother died, for shutting down after your mother passed, for making you feel like you weren't enough to pull me out of my grief. The truth is, you were always enough. I just didn't know how to let you be. Your mother knew. Near the end, she made me promise I wouldn't disappear on you. 'Don't shut Sarah out when I'm gone,' she said. I promised, and then I broke that promise every single day for 8 years. I told myself I was protecting you, that you had your own life, your own problems, and you didn't need your broken old father weighing you down. But that was a lie. I was protecting myself, because if I let you in, I'd have to admit how scared I was, how lost, how much it hurt to keep breathing when everyone I loved kept disappearing. The thing on my back, I'd noticed it 20 years ago, just a small bump at first. I told myself it was nothing. Then it grew, and I told myself it would stop. Then it hurt, and I told myself I could handle it. I've spent 2 decades lying to myself because the truth was too terrifying to face. I thought being a man meant being strong, never complaining, never asking for help, never showing weakness. My father taught me that. His father taught him. It's a poison that's been passed down through generations, and I'm so tired of carrying it. Emma's video, the one about toxic masculinity, she's right. Everything she said, she's right. I taught you to be strong, but I never taught you that asking for help is strong. That vulnerability isn't failure. That love means letting people see you at your worst and trusting they'll stay anyway. If I don't make it through tomorrow, I need you to know you were the best thing I ever built. Better than any house, any cabinet, any piece of furniture I ever made. You are my masterpiece, and I am so proud of the woman you've become. Take care of Emma. She's got your mother's fire and your stubbornness and something entirely her own. The courage to say things my generation was too afraid to speak out loud. She's gonna change the world. And Sarah, let people love you. Don't make my mistakes. Don't wait until you're broken and scared and 74 years old to finally accept that you can't carry everything alone. I love you. I've always loved you. Even when I couldn't show it. Even when I pushed you away. Even when the silence between us felt too wide to cross. I love you, Dad. He folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope he found in the bedside table drawer, and wrote, "For Sarah," on the front. Then he tucked it under his pillow next to the photo he always carried Sarah and Michael Jr. as children, gap-toothed and grinning, before the world taught them about loss. Sleep came finally, fitful and full of dreams. At 6 in the morning, Dr. Thornton came in with the pre-surgery team. Sarah and Emma arrived minutes later, both looking like they hadn't slept either. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Thornton asked, checking Walter's vitals. "Scared," he admitted. The word felt strange in his mouth, foreign after a lifetime of pretending otherwise. "Terrified, actually." "Good." Dr. Thornton met his eyes. "Fear means you're human. It means you understand what's at stake. That's healthy." An orderly came with the gurney to wheel him to pre-op. Sarah walked beside him, Emma on the other side, each holding one of his hands. "There's a letter," Walter said, "under my pillow. If something happens—" "Nothing's going to happen?" Sarah interrupted, but her voice shook. "If it does, read it, please." They reached the pre-op area. The nurses needed to prep him IV lines, monitors, all the machinery required to keep a body alive while they cut it open and rearranged what was inside. Emma leaned down, kissed his weathered cheek. "Come back to us, Grandpa." "I'll try, sweetheart." Sarah bent close, her forehead touching his. "You taught me to be strong my whole life. Now I'm going to teach you something. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to need us. And no matter what happens in that operating room, you're loved. Do you understand? You're so loved." Walter's vision blurred with tears. "I understand." "Then fight. Fight like you're fighting for someone you love, because we're fighting for you." They took him then, wheeling him through double doors into a bright white room that smelled like disinfectant and possibility. Dr. Thornton was already there, scrubbing in, surrounded by 5 other medical professionals whose names Walter didn't know, but whose presence meant life or death. "We're going to take good care of you," Dr. Thornton said. "I promise." The anesthesiologist placed a mask over Walter's face. "Count backward from 10 for me." 10. Walter thought of Sarah's face. 9. Emma's video, her fierce courage. 8. Tom Palmer and 40 years of friendship. 7. Margaret Chen and Dave Thompson and all the people whose stories he'd forgotten, but who hadn't forgotten him. 6. Martha, his wife, her final words, "Don't shut Sarah out." 5. Michael Jr., the son he'd never stopped mourning. 4. The tumor on his back, finally being cut away. 3. 20 years of pain about to end. 2. Sarah's hand in his. 1. Darkness took him. In the waiting room, Sarah sat with Emma and Tom and 50 other people who'd come to pray for a man who'd spent his life helping them. Her phone buzzed constantly messages from across the country, from people who'd watched Emma's videos and were now following Walter's story like it was their own. The surgery was scheduled for 7 hours. 7 hours of not knowing, 7 hours of hoping that 60% would be enough. Sarah pulled the letter from under her father's pillow, held it in her lap, and prayed she wouldn't need to open it. The clock on the wall read 8:15 and 6 hours and 45 minutes to go. Hour one passed in agonizing silence. Sarah sat clutching her father's letter, reading the words on the envelope over and over. For Sarah, his handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. Emma leaned against her shoulder. "Mom, what if—" "Don't!" Sarah's voice came out sharper than she intended. "Don't go there!" Around them, the waiting room had become a vigil. Tom Palmer sat with his hands clasped, lips moving in silent prayer. Margaret Chen's congregation had formed a prayer circle in the corner. Dave Thompson paced the hallway, unable to sit still. People Sarah had never met kept approaching, sharing stories about her father she'd never heard. A woman in her 30s with kind eyes. "Mr. Morrison fixed my car when I was 17 and broke. Wouldn't take payment. Said to pay it forward when I could." An elderly man with a walker. "He built my deck 15 years ago. Still solid as the day he finished it. Best craftsmanship I've ever seen." A young mother with 2 children. "He made a crib for my son, carved animals on the headboard. It's the most beautiful thing I own." Each story, another piece of her father Tara hadn't known existed. Walter Morrison, the quiet saint of Millbrook, helping everyone except himself. Hour 2, a nurse emerged from the surgical wing, and 50 people stood at once. But she was just checking on a different patient. Sarah sank back into her chair, heart hammering. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Fletcher, this is Marcus Brennan. I'm in the parking lot. May I come up?" Sarah frowned at the name. Marcus Brennan, the man who'd messaged her after the board meeting. The one her father had supposedly helped 25 years ago. "Sure." 3rd floor waiting room. 10 minutes later, a man in an expensive suit walked in. Early 40s, dark hair graying at the temples, carrying himself with the confidence of success. He looked completely out of place among the working-class crowd in their flannel and denim. "Mrs. Fletcher." He extended his hand. "Marcus Brennan. Thank you for seeing me. You said my father helped you." "More than helped. Saved me." Marcus sat down, and despite the expensive clothes, there was something humble in his posture. "I grew up in Millbrook. My mother was a single parent, worked 2 jobs, barely keeping us afloat. When I was 16, I got accepted to a summer carpentry program, a scholarship opportunity that could lead to college. But I needed tools, materials, fees. We couldn't afford any of it." He paused, emotion flickering across his face. "Your father heard about it somehow. Showed up at our house with a truck full of tools, lumber, everything I needed. Said he was lending it to me. But when I tried to return it after the program, he refused. Told me to keep it, use it to build my future." "That sounds like him," Sarah said quietly. "That program changed my life. I got into Montana State for engineering, worked construction to pay my way through, started my own company 10 years ago. Now I run Brennan Construction. We're one of the largest firms in the Northwest. All because your father gave a scared kid a chance." Marcus reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope. "When I saw your daughter's video, I wanted to help. Dr. Thornton mentioned the community raised $92,000. This is for the remaining 88. Sarah stared at the envelope. I can't. Please, Marcus pressed it into her hands. Your father gave me everything when he had no reason to. He didn't know me, didn't know if I'd succeed or fail. He just saw someone who needed help and helped. Let me return the favor. Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $88,000. Dr. Thornton already paid. Then this is for his recovery, physical therapy, home care, whatever he needs. Marcus stood. I would have given twice that and considered it the bargain of my life. Sarah couldn't speak, could only stare at this stranger, not a stranger, really, but another person her father had touched and lifted up, who was repaying kindness from a quarter-century ago. Thank you, she finally managed. Marcus smiled. Thank him. When he wakes up. When, not if. The certainty in his voice felt like a lifeline. Hour 3, 4, 5. The clock crawled forward like it was moving through molasses. Sarah's coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her back ached from the waiting room chairs. Emma had fallen into an exhausted doze against her shoulder. At hour 6, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She stood, walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Montana stretched out below mountains in the distance. Endless sky, the kind of rugged beauty her father had always loved. He's gonna make it. Tom Palmer appeared beside her. Walter Morrison is the toughest son of a gun I've ever known. Tough isn't enough sometimes. No, Tom agreed. But loved is, and that man is more loved than he ever understood. Hour 7 arrived, then 7:15, 7:30. At 7 hours and 42 minutes, the surgical wing doors opened. Dr. Rebecca Thornton walked out, still in her scrubs, surgical cap dangling from one hand. Her face was exhausted, drawn, impossible to read. Sarah's heart stopped. Around her, 50 people held their breath. Dr. Thornton pulled down her mask, and Sarah saw at the smallest hint of a smile. He made it. The waiting room erupted. People crying, hugging, shouting with relief. Emma grabbed Sarah, both of them sobbing. Tom Palmer dropped into a chair, hands over his face, shoulders shaking. Sarah pushed through the crowd to Dr. Thornton. He's alive. He's alive. In recovery. It was complicated. The tumor was more extensive than we anticipated, wrapped around nerve bundles in ways we didn't expect, but we got it all, every bit of it. Dr. Thornton's voice wavered with exhaustion and triumph. It's going to be a long recovery. Physical therapy, pain management, monitoring for nerve damage. But barring complications, he should regain full mobility within 6 months. Can I see him? Give us an hour to get him settled in ICU. Then yes. Sarah hugged the doctor. This woman who'd risked her career and life savings for a man she barely knew. I don't know how to thank you. Tell your father to let people help him from now on. That's thanks enough. Dr. Thornton squeezed her shoulder. Go get some air. You look like you're about to collapse. Sarah walked outside into September sunshine. The world looked different, sharper, clearer, like she'd been living behind a film of gray that had suddenly been wiped away. Her father was alive. Her stubborn, prideful, loving father was alive. Her phone buzzed. Emma had already posted the news Grandpa made it through surgery, and the comments flooded in by the thousands. People celebrating, crying, sharing their own stories of reconciliation and healing, and families brought back from the brink. An hour later, Sarah stood outside room 203. Through the window, she could see her father pale, bruised, surrounded by monitors and tubes, but breathing, alive. She pushed through the door. Walter's eyes opened at the sound. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then he smiled, weak but genuine. And Sarah saw something she hadn't seen in 8 years. Peace. "Hey, Sarah Bear," he whispered, his voice rough from the breathing tube. Sarah pulled a chair close, took his hand. "Hey, Dad, did you read the letter?" She shook her head. "Didn't need to. You're here. You can tell me yourself." Walter's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry for everything. For all the years I know. Me too." Sarah leaned forward, kissed his forehead. "But we've got time now. Time to figure it out. Time to do better." "Time," Walter repeated, like the word was precious, foreign, a gift he'd never expected to receive. Outside the window, Montana's mountains stood eternal against an endless sky. Inside the room 203, a father and daughter began the slow work of building a bridge across 8 years of silence. Emma arrived with Tom Palmer and Margaret Chen, then Dave Thompson with his family, Marcus Brennan with flowers. One by one, the people Walter Morrison had helped over a lifetime came to witness his return from the edge. The room filled with quiet voices, gentle laughter, the sound of a community celebrating one of their own. Walter looked around at all these faces, people he'd helped, people who'd fought for him, people who proved that love, real love, is never a burden but a gift freely given and gratefully received. "I spent my whole life thinking I had to be strong alone," he said softly. "Turns out the strongest thing I ever did was finally let go." And Sarah squeezed his hand. "Welcome back, Dad. We've been waiting for you." Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning shadows. Inside, an old man who'd carried pain for 20 years finally learned what it meant to be held, to be loved, to be home. Walter Morrison's story isn't just about a tumor on his back. It's about the invisible weight we all carry, the belief that asking for help means we've failed, that vulnerability equals weakness, that real strength means suffering in silence. How many of us have pushed away the people who love us because we didn't want to be a burden? How many conversations have we avoided? How many phone calls left unmade? How many years wasted believing we had to carry everything alone? The truth, Walter learned at 74, is something we all need to hear. Love isn't about being strong enough to never need anyone. It's about being brave enough to let people see us at our most broken and trusting they'll stay anyway. It's about understanding that the hands reaching toward us aren't offering pity. They're offering connection. The fundamental human need we've been taught to deny. Sarah spent 3 years believing her father didn't love her, when the truth was he loved her so much he couldn't bear to let her see him hurting. How many of our own relationships are trapped in that same tragic misunderstanding? How many children think their parents are distant when really they're just scared? How many parents believe their grown children are too busy when really they're just waiting for an invitation? The miracle of this story isn't the surgery or the money raised or even the survival. It's simpler and more profound. A man finally learned to say, "I need you." A daughter finally understood "I love you" can sound like silence when you're too afraid to speak. A community proved that the love you give away always comes back multiplied. If you're reading this and thinking of someone you've pushed away, someone you've been too proud to call, someone you love but haven't told in too long, this is your sign. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait until you're broken and desperate and running out of time. Pick up the phone today, write the letter, say the words that are harder than any weight you've carried alone. Walter spent 20 years hiding his pain because he thought he had to. What are you hiding? What burden are you carrying that you don't have to bear alone? And most importantly, who's been waiting for you to finally let them in? The bravest thing you can do isn't staying strong. It's admitting you're tired. It's reaching out. It's trusting that the people who love you won't see your vulnerability as weakness, but as the greatest gift you could give them, the chance to love you back. So, here's my question for you. Who do you need to call today? What conversation have you been avoiding that could change everything? Share your story in the comments. Maybe your words will be the permission someone else needs to finally reach out. Maybe together we can break the cycle of silence that keeps so many of us suffering alone. Leave a comment below and let's start healing together.